Hi, everybody, all 53 of you, or four. So great to see you all. Thanks for coming back to our second session of Clinical Trials Connect, hosted by Jeff Sturm and our Clinical Trials Committee. So thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening. Remember, this is not medical advice. Please consult with your physician or a team. Also, too, this is being recorded, so hopefully you will engage, put questions in the chat or raise a hand. You can, then when called on, you can come on camera and speak, but you are being recorded. So if you're uncomfortable with being seen, please keep your camera off, change your name, whatever you need to do. You can be incognito, but we definitely want participation and interaction. Just want to remind you, you're being recorded. So, of course, as always, we will kick off with some polling questions to see who's here, what you're thinking. And at the end, there will also be a question where we're going to want your answers in the chat. So it's not actually a quiz per se, but there will be written answers. Here we go. Would you consider a clinical trial? Are you here looking for a clinical trial? Would you go on a clinical trial? What's your story? Okay, 100% end poll. 75% of you are yes. Some of you are maybe if it was in my area. 14% of you are maybe if it was in my area. Makes sense. And 16% of you only if I progressed and had no options. So you're in the right place.
Hey, Summer, while that's up, can I say something?
Please.
So I think I just wanted everybody to know is sort of just based on those. There we go. Thank you. That maybe in your area. So Saudi and I have been working with 3 or 4 companies starting trials, and there's getting to be a quite a bigger range of cities and states that aren't the usual suspects, Boston, Denver, Los Angeles, so forth. It's getting to be quite a variety, and we've really been pushing on that. Also, we've been pushing on also trials in Canada and the EU. And on the last one, only if I progressed, almost all the new trials starting up, with the exception of the one at MD Anderson, only if I progress. There are about a half a dozen trials starting up, have started just already in this first quarter or through this year, specifically for that, for patients who are progressing. So if you know people, we're going to go through that. Jeff, I'm sure will, but I think we want you to know that we're trying to address some of those key challenges, such as location and what to do when you progress. So,
and just in case there's someone on the call or some people on the call that don't know who you are, do you want to just do a quick self-introduction?
You're muted,
yes,
Ken, somehow.
My name's Ken Culver. I'm the medical director, head of research, and the executive director for ALK Positive. It's a real privilege to be in this role, and we've made a lot of progress on the number of companies who are interested in develop their drugs for ALK patients. And they need to, this may come up later in the discussion, but in almost all cases, they need to first test them in patients who are in progression, where when we don't know the efficacy or the safety, they don't want to give it to someone, like probably most all of you on the phone who are at MRD and are doing well. We want you to be an MRD and doing well forever. So so anyway, that's the population that'll get served first. And for all of them, of course, like the Nuvalent drug, neladalkib, if it's successful in the progressing state, it'll move into earlier stages. So thank you, Jeff. Jeff, I like your new, you're growing a little bit of a goatee, I see.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe if I fertilize, I'll be a real adult beard after a while.
It's all zoomed in tonight.
I want to introduce JP Noonan. JP, could you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are.
Sure, JP Noonan, been with the ALK Positive group for 5+ years now. Have worked in the pharmaceutical industry for 25, 26 years, running clinical trials, kind of started at the site and now kind of manage them from the pharmaceutical end. So just, here to give whatever perspective I have and answer any questions that you have. And yeah, hope to bring some value to the table here. So good evening, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, JP. Is Mark up or am I going on to the next stage?
Mark is coming and going. I don't know, am I here? Am I not here?
You're here. You're here. Have you ever participated in a clinical trial? If yes, please email networking@alkpositive.org so we can feature you in our LCAM campaign. Okay, that was old, I think, but have you participated? We always love to hear, so feel free to reach out. We love to share our clinical trial stories. Okay, and then below there you can do some choices.
Summer, just
yes.
on that last point that you made, a number of the companies who are thinking of doing clinical trials for outpatients want to talk to patients who know about clinical trials. So I think if you do let us know, there may be opportunities to meet with some of the companies so you can share your opinions about the challenges, the opportunities, things you like or didn't like, to help facilitate trials that are, we don't want to have trials just to have trials. We want good trials, good for patients, first off. So anyway, just wanted to add that.
I love that. That's so important. And our big goal too is to make sure that people know what they're getting themselves into with a trial, know when is the right time for a trial. Is it progression? Is it before? And by sharing your story, you're helping others. Okay, so we have you participated in a clinical trial? 22% of you here have, so we definitely are going to want to hear from you. And no, 78% of you have not yet been in a trial. And which trials have you been on? 8% of you were on a trial testing for alectinib, 8% for brigatinib, 8%, this is crazy, for lorlatinib. I love this. 58% of those that have been on a trial before, of that 22%, have been on the NBL 655 or neladalkib trial, 8% for gilteritinib, Dr. Lamb's vaccine, 8%, and 17% have done some other type of trial. Thank you so much for sharing that.
That's really impressive, Summer. You know, the average number of the global norm is about 5% of cancer patients are on a clinical trial.
Wow.
Now, this is only a sample of 60 some, but what was it, 17% or something like that?
Yeah, was it 22, I think, that have been on
22%.
one? Yeah. I'm sorry, the ALK intern is yelling in the background here. Go ahead, Ken.
Your quality control person, I know.
But anyways, I'm going to introduce myself real quick, and then Mark Rosenzweig, and I'm from outside Detroit, and I've been diagnosed since 2013. And it's the first time I actually met Ellee face to face. I've seen Ellie's post since 2017, basically, in ALK Positive. I really want to thank her for everything that she's done for ALK Positive. And I know we have a lot of people that are on this call who've really been giving up so many tremendous amount of hours to help us and to further our medicines and working with big pharma and just countless hours of spending time. So I want to thank everyone who's on the medical committees who are part of this this call. And this is a monthly call that Jeff Sturm has put together with Ken, and I'm very, very thankful. So I'm going to pass over to Summer.
No, I'm going to toss it on over to Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff. Thanks, Mark.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming very much. My name is Jeff Sturm. I'm a member of the board of directors of ALK Positive, member of two of the medical committees, and I'm on my 7th modality, including 3 clinical trials, and I'm feeling pretty good. I'm very happy about it. And for an agenda today, we had the introductions so far. Ellie's soon to come. But first, we have a rather big announcement to make of the drum roll, the Triana Biomedicine's new drug for ALK specifically. It's a molecular glue degrader. Note here that it's a pill, and it's a completely different mechanism than all the other drugs that we've been taking before. And we're very hopeful for it. And they dosed the first patient today. So this is probably the biggest event since maybe first dosing of lorlatinib, perhaps. It's a very big deal for us. And like I say, if you've gone through all your TKIs, this one should be the next one on your list. And with that, I'll stop sharing. And probably next meeting, we'll have significant information on that. One, it hasn't hit the clinicaltrials.government yet, so we don't have all the facts, although Ken's got more than most. And then we'll share that. But the big event tonight is Ellee Urban to share her clinical trial spreadsheet. And she's a care partner to her husband, Glenn. She's a retired psychiatrist and has shared her knowledge and medical school training on the ALK Positive support group since 2017. In the early years of ALK Positive, Ellee served on the medical committees and research review panel. Since 2018, Ellee has been compiling a list of clinical trials available to ALK Positive patients. This list serves as a foundation for our knowledge of developing technologies and upcoming treatments. It's an invaluable resource to our patients and community, and we welcome Ellee to walk us through her clinical trial spreadsheet. The screen is yours, Ellee. Thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you, Summer, and thank you, Mark, and so glad that we're having this meeting. It's really exciting to do something new and different with ALK Talk, and I'm really, really happy to be here. So thanks so much for inviting me, and then thanks everyone for coming. I'm amazed at how many people are here because clinical trials on the surface is not that interesting. You know, once you know about them, they're fascinating, but when you first hear about them, they're not so interesting. So I think it's great that so many people here are interested and want to learn. So what I want to talk about is the clinical trial spreadsheet that I've been putting together since 2018 and started with the medical committee. We got it going with Colin and the people on that committee. And then I just took over and I've been doing it about every month since then for many, many years. And I just want to talk about what it's for, how we can use it, and then sort of open up and we'll just talk about clinical trials and other things in general. So I have a little bit of knowledge of almost every clinical trial that's recruiting for ALK, but not very much. You know, what I do is a little bit on the surface, and Ken, knows much more. But so I have this big superficial knowledge about a lot of trials. So how I got interested in clinical trials at first was my husband was diagnosed with ALK positive lung cancer, stage 4, in 2016, and he was diagnosed, and I get emotional when I talk about this because it was such a hard time when we went through it. He was diagnosed, and the first thing that I thought was stage 4 lung cancer was I wanted to get him into a clinical trial. When I was in medical school 35 years prior, one of the things we learned is that if you have a bad cancer and the prognosis isn't very good, then you want to look for a clinical trial. And the reason is because the standard of care treatment is not good enough. So if the cancer has a poor prognosis, it means that the treatments that we're using right now aren't good enough and you need something better. And so since he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and of course, I didn't know he was ALK or anything like that, it felt like, well, chemotherapy, it's not good enough. We need to do something better. So I really started looking into clinical trials for him. One of the things that I ran into is we were seeing a local oncologist. And so first appointment, I said, okay, clinical trials. And he said, well, there really aren't any around here. And I said, well, of course, I'm willing to go to Denver. We're in Boulder, Colorado. It's about an hour away. And he wasn't into it. He didn't seem interested in it. And so that kind of bothered me. I went into clinicaltrials.gov, which is a huge database of trials all over the world, to try to look for first-line lung cancer trials in Colorado. And I found a number of them at UC Health in Denver, which is where Dr. Kamich is, and did a lot of trials. So I went ahead and scheduled an appointment to see someone there to talk about trials. And really interestingly, they stuck us with Dr. Kamich right away. So we got just incredibly lucky to have him as the first doctor. So we did that. And then I went to a support group really, really early, like a week and a half after my husband was diagnosed, because I was losing it. I mean, it was so bad. And so I was crying and carrying on. And then one of the people in the group said, well, if you're interested in a clinical trial, don't have him take any medicine. Because if you start a medicine, you might disqualify him from the clinical trial. And I hadn't really thought about that. So, at the support group, I learned, oh my gosh, this is something hugely important that I hadn't thought about. So I was so grateful to get that information from him. The day before our appointment at UC Health, the local oncologist called and told us that Glenn had ALK. And Glenn said, well, is that a good thing? And he said, well, sometimes. I mean, he was so negative. And I had done some research, so I knew it was a good thing. And so it was so frustrating. And then he said he was putting things in place for Glenn to start crizotinib. And I said, no, we're looking for a clinical trial. Don't want to start crizotinib yet, And I said, do you know of any trials? And he, of course, said no. So then that night after Glenn got diagnosed with ALK, I went through and researched. And there's a first-line trial for ALK in Denver, an hour from where we live. And it was for brigatinib versus crizotinib. And Glenn ended up in the brigatinib arm of the trial. So I found this trial. So then we show up at UC Health the next day. We see Dr. Kamich. And I said, oh, we just found out he has ALK. And Dr. Kamich said, oh, you are in the right place. And it was wonderful. Dr. Kamich was just wonderful. The whole system at UC Health was wonderful. So we got rid of the local oncologist who, just really didn't meet our needs. And I mentioned to Dr. Kamich about this clinical trial, the brigatinib versus crizotinib trial. And he said, sure, let's do it. And so he was the first one to join that trial in Colorado. So that was how I got interested in clinical trials. And Glenn is still on brigatinib 9 years later. So it has become approved, and now he just gets it through normal channels. He's not in the trial anymore. But it turned out to be, an amazing experience. And it was the perfect drug for him, it turns out. So, I was bummed out that the local oncologist really wasn't helpful with kind of anything, actually. And what I was thinking about as I was in the ALK positive community was that I felt pretty isolated in terms of looking for a clinical trial at the beginning. And, I got help from the support group and I did a lot of research on my own, but there really wasn't a whole lot of help. And so I thought it'd be useful to come up with a gigantic list of trials that are recruiting for ALK so people can kind of be directed to this list. And that way people have more support when they're looking for trials. So that's how I ended up getting involved in setting up the spreadsheet and keeping it up to date. And we were talking about clinical trials, when you have a clinical trial. And one thing to consider is anytime your prognosis doesn't look so hot in the next line of treatment, then you should probably look at a clinical trial, rather than doing standard of care. If the response rate's 30% or it's like, well, wait a minute, if that's the best we're going to do, you might want to think to look for a clinical trial and see if you can get something that's more unique that might work better. So I'm in favor of it at the beginning and then any point in treatment. And also clinical trials are for people who can't tolerate the standard of care. So that's another option, that if you're not able to take the standard of care, then you might be able to go into a clinical trial even without progression. So talking a little bit about the spreadsheet that we set up, the way that I get the trials for the spreadsheet is through the website clinicaltrials.gov. It's a huge, huge database. And what I do is I search lung cancer and ALK. And then all the trials that come up, I take a look at. One of the huge problems is in clinicaltrials.gov, if a trial excludes ALK and then writes that down, it comes up in the search for ALK. So at least 40–50% of the trials that come up in my search exclude ALK, and you can't get into it. So it's so frustrating. So I think the average person who uses that database is going to be in trouble because you have to look through every single trial and see if they actually exclude people with ALK. So I do that. I come up with, I look through every trial and find out if they do include people with ALK. And then I put it in an Excel spreadsheet. The other information I get about trials is from you guys, from the group. The people tell me in the support group about the trials. Someone's been on a trial. Ken will tell me, Colin, I get information. Anytime someone suggests it, I put it in the spreadsheet. So that's how we get the information. It's not complete because we can always miss something. And it's also done by hand. So there could be mistakes or things that aren't perfect. And Colin notices a lot of typos that he likes to tell me about. So if you see a typo, you just have to kind of ignore it. I do a lot of typing on this thing, and sometimes I screw it up. About once a year, I go through and clear it all up. So there's lots of typos, but you know what we mean.
Yep.
So that's how we put the spreadsheet together, and we're going to look at it in a second. But up to this point, are there any questions? And
there was a question in the chat, which I believe I can address, Ellie. So Pam was asking, how do we find out about trials for ALK positive cancers, not just ALK positive non-small cell lung cancer, right? So Ellie spreadsheet, and if you attended the last meeting that we had on this last month, I presented our clinical trial finder as well, which is basically mirroring Ellie's spreadsheet, but it may have some additional trials. But both of those are not just for ALK positive non-small cell lung cancer. We have plenty of studies, in both the spreadsheet and in our finder that are for patients who have solid tumors, right? And we've done a review in both to make sure that that's not excluding ALK. And then what we're further doing is trying to expand our widget to include all ALK cancers, so not just ALK positive non-small cell lung cancer. Pam, was I able to address your question? Do you have anything further?
It's just a question that just popped up asking where can they find the spreadsheet?
Okay, I'm going to address that so we can, good question. So we can move on to that. So there's, let's see, let me share here. I'm not Zoom talented as I'd like. Let's see. Oh. Okay. Am I sharing?
Yes.
Okay. So to find the spreadsheet, you just go into the alkpositive.org website, and then you'll see up here, it says clinical trials. So you click on that, and then start to scroll down. First of all, what you're going to see is what Sadia refers to as the widget. And this is a clinical trial search tool that's really specific. You put in the information about you, and then it comes back and tells you about trials, where you're at in treatment, where you live. And so this is a really good search tool that's really individualized. And so I think this is probably a more useful tool to find trials, especially if you live in a place where there's not that many. So, I highly recommend taking a look at this because it's just excellent. And it's taken a long time to get this going. Jeff and I tried something like this many years ago, disaster. So it's really nice that this is up and working. So keep scrolling, keep going. And then we have a list of ALK positive inclusive clinical trials. And then here's the spreadsheet. Oh, that's see if I can make it a little smaller. So here's the spreadsheet. And as you can see, it's very listy, but in some ways that's good because you can just kind of zip through all the titles of the trials. And then also it lists some locations. So it's really a nice overview of what's going on with all the trials for ALK. So first of all, this first tab here, this is the one that's up. This is for all ALK lung cancer trials except those in China. And I'll explain later why we don't include China. The next tab is general lung cancer trials that probably include ALK. And this tends to be for people who have exhausted the TKIs or any standard treatments, who then are moving on to other chemotherapies, maybe immunotherapies and things like that. Next tab is not yet recruiting ALK trials. And I check these to make sure when they flip over to recruiting that we move them. Here's the tab for ALK non-lung trials. So solid tumors, lymphoma, brain tumors are included here. Then the next tabs are the locations. And what I've done is taken the list of trials and then divided them out between all areas of the world, several regions. And up here, it's color-coded, you can see. So what you can do is you can go into your region of the world and look for the trials that are in that region. And then also all these trials are still included on the main page and they're color-coded by location. So that's how it works in general. Sorry, I gotta not do this. The different categories we have, it's recruiting for surgical resectable disease. Unfortunately, I don't see any trials for unresectable, which is bad. And then first line, first and second line, second, third, and fourth line, and then leptomeningeal metastasis, which we don't have right now. So you can look kind of where you're at of treatment and then pick the trials that might fit you. So I wanted to look at one particular trial so we can take a look at how it works across the page. That's not the one I wanted. There we go. This is the trial of neladalkib, NVL655, that is comparing neladalkib to alectinib. And the nickname for this trial is Alcazar. So this first column is the name of the trial and a quick summary of what the trial is. The second column here is the phase of the trial. And that kind of tells you if it's been in another study prior. This is a phase 3 trial. So what that means is that neladalkib has been in other trials previously. This is not a first in human trial. The next column is a general view of what the inclusion criteria are. So what kind of patients they want. This is very general. It's just to give you a sense of whether you'll fit the trial or not. And the inclusion criteria here are confirmed locally advanced or metastatic non-small lung cancer, documented ALK rearrangement, no prior systemic anti-cancer treatment. So that means you can't have had any prior chemotherapy, any TKIs, any treatment that goes through the whole body. Probably local treatment is okay, but no treatment that has gone through the whole body. It does say you can have chemotherapy, but only 12 months before you enter the trial. You have to have tissue available for a biopsy, either old tissue or you'll get some new tissue. And you can have brain mets as long as they're clinically stable. So this is a list of, it's a very vague list, but it would really give you a sense of whether the trial might work for you or not. The next column is all the locations. Now this trial has 112 locations, so I didn't write them all down. It's way, way too much to fit in that little box, but I included several states and the countries. And then also that they're always adding locations to this trial. So you'd want to check out the link and see if your location is there. So moving across, the sponsor is Nuvalent, they're the drug company. And here's the best part here. This is the link. And if you click on the link, it brings you up to a detailed description of the trial. And it's really detailed. This is from clinicaltrials.gov. And for this particular trial, it lists all the locations. So all 112, and there they are. So you can just go through and find your country and then find a trial that's in your area. Let's scroll down a lot. And then the other thing they have here on this page that's good is the more comprehensive list of inclusion and exclusion criteria. So going back, so that's how the spreadsheet works. And it's, there's, I don't know, over 100 trials listed for both ALK and then also for general lung cancer that probably includes ALK. And so you can, It's also nice in using the spreadsheet is it gives you a feel for what's going on in the research for ALK. And that's one of the nice things too. You really get a sense of what's new and what's happening. So that's the spreadsheet. And before we stop, are there any questions about that? Nope.
Ellie, it's
Okay.
Ken. I'd like to just make sure everybody realizes that this spreadsheet is extraordinarily valuable to, and one example of how it's so valuable is I'm meeting with the executive director of Lung Cancer Europe. And before I met with her, I looked at the website for, she's also the executive director for ALK Positive UK. And I look in their website, and when you go to clinical trials, they link directly to Ellie's spreadsheet. So when I met with her, I said, I noticed you're linking to our spreadsheet. She said, it is so good. Why would we reinvent the wheel? Like it was a real compliment, Ellie. And so it's nice to see people around the world see the value of this.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And
there's one thing I forgot. Oh, sorry. I just remembered I didn't list this.
Just one more thing I wanted to add when you talk
Yeah.
about the more comprehensive list of inclusion exclusion on that clinicaltrials.gov, that link there, which is wonderful to go to. Just a caveat that still isn't all of the inclusion exclusion. So you can definitely get a better picture of who is included and what might exclude you from the trial, but there's still typically many more inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria that exist within the protocol. So just something to think about when you're reading through that list.
Yeah.
JP or Ellie or Sadia, probably Sadia and JP, if you want to just explain what the next step then would be to find out what the remaining inclusion exclusion criteria might be.
So once you've searched clinicaltrials.gov and you find the location that you want to go to, you reach out to the site. And what you want to do is basically look at the consent, right? So the consent form is a detailed document. It'll tell you everything you need to know about what to expect, from a clinical trial, what your time commitment might be, if there's reimbursement being provided for your travel costs, what the risks are, what the benefits are, how many patients have been dosed to date on that trial. So all that information is in the consent form. And that's where you can get more detailed information and then have a discussion with the site staff to address any questions and just learn more.
Yeah, just one thing to add, there's always contact information on that clinicaltrials.gov page. So if you look at the list of sites and you might want to go to a site that is, convenient for you, or a site even where your oncologist is, so you can go to your oncologist if they are participating in that trial, and they can answer a lot of those questions for you. But there is always, if it's not your oncologist, there's always contact information. For some companies, it leads you to kind of a medical information contact, and they'll put you in touch with the study team to answer any questions you have. So multiple ways to kind of get that information that you need.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really good point, that a lot of it has to do with your own self-advocacy, that the oncologists, especially local ones, they don't always know about these trials. They don't have the time to look for them. And so it's a lot of our people, just like we did, they find a trial and then they call the trial site and they find out about it, make the appointment, and with any luck, change the doctor to the one who's in the trial running it. So that's common. Jeff, I wanted to ask, you've been in a lot of trials. Did you self-refer to any of those trials?
No, Alice Shaw referred me to the Electative trial early on. The other two, I did self-refer. And I have to say that my informing of my own oncologist had her send 2 or 3 other people to UC Davis for the neladalkib trial. So there's a theme there, I think, that we have an obligation when these new trials come out to inform our oncologists and give them write-ups or news announcements, et cetera, of different trials, maybe even printouts from clinicaltrial.gov, just to let them know that there are ALK positive trials And if they have any other ALK positive patients that they ought to send them to, because otherwise they have no way of knowing.
Yeah, and I'd like to add two things to this fantastic discussion. One is one of the ways we're trying to make it easier is that if you go through the spreadsheet and you get an idea of what things look like at a high level, which is a nice way that Ellie described it, and then you go into our ALK Clinical Trial Finder on the website, in there, you just look for the trial. You can use in that middle column G there, the NCT code. You can just copy paste that right into our tool. It'll bring you to that site, to that trial, and then you can just click on email site. And you can put in there, I'm interested in this clinical trial. Can you please send me the inclusion, exclusion criteria, whatever you want? And then that will go, and Sadia is constantly trying to keep that updated so that it's actually getting to the study team. Sort of what JP was alluding to, sometimes it can take a roundabout way till it finally gets to the study team. So that's one option to make it a little easier. And I know, Sadia, we've had quite a few people use that feature already.
Yes.
So it's just something to keep in mind. And
I
then,
also want to add, Ken, that what we're trying to do with the next version or the next update to the Finder is add a checkbox, right? Where if a patient is searching for a trial and they reach out to the study center or they reach out for more information, if they haven't received a response in what I consider to be an adequate time frame, right? Then I have the ability to be able to just contact the site and say, hey, I can see, as an administrator, that we've had these many patients reach out and it's been now 3 days and there's been no response or no contact made with the site. So that's what we're trying to do, because our goal here is to help and to facilitate a response, because not every contact is a direct contact, right? Some may just be a general email, some may be for a company, or it's going to different people. So you just want to make sure that patients are getting a response in a timely manner. And then I'm always a contact as well, right? So I'm listed as basically a navigator, right? So if you're using the trial finder and you have questions and you're running into issues, then you reach out to me, and then I'm the one that can help address some of that and help facilitate a response if you're not getting it.
So before I stop sharing the screen, I wanted to mention one more column, which I forgot. The last column of the spreadsheet is a summary that I put together of what I think is going on in the trial. Sometimes I cut and paste, or sometimes I just have to kind of figure it out. So I look up what kind of a drug it is and the mechanism of action. But then also sometimes I'll have an editorial comment if I have some concerns about consent or the protocol of the trial. So for this one, for the Alcazar trial, which is neladalkib versus alectinib, I had some concerns about that, because if you join the trial, you don't know if you're going to get neladalkib or alectinib. You're randomized between the two. And the concern that I have is that lorlatinib now is usually the standard of care first line. And so if you join this trial, you'll either get neladalkib or alectinib, but you won't be offered lorlatinib. And then if you're not in the trial, you probably would get lorlatinib. So that's a big problem, I think, with consent for the trial, in that if you join this trial and you get the alectinib, you're probably not getting the standard of care treatment that most people get. And this is just because they designed the trial before the Crown study showed that lorlatinib looked superior to alectinib. Now, this still might be a good trial for a lot of people. There's a lot of countries that don't have lorlatinib available, in which case this would be a good trial. There might be someone who's comfortable with getting alectinib instead of lorlatinib, and this would be a good trial for them. But what's really important, I think, is that you have to know that to consent to it. You have to know that alectinib is not necessarily what you would get if you were not in the trial. And you have to really give it some thought to see if you want to join that trial. So in these kind of situations, I'll put in a little note, something to watch out for. It doesn't happen very often, but I'll put in a note that I've got some concerns there.
And just to add on to Ellie's very astute comment there, when you join a trial, and Sadia and JP and Jeff can definitely add on to my quick comment here. When you join a trial, you can opt out of the trial at any time for any reason. You do not need an excuse. You don't have to explain why. You can, I'm sure they'd like to know why, but you don't have to. And so even if you see something where like, well, I don't know if I want to join a trial because I could get alectinib and, that's not the latest, greatest approved drug at the moment. The answer is yes, join the trial. And then if you happen to get randomized to the alectinib arm, you can say, well, I'd rather go and get lorlatinib. JP or Sadia or Jeff, if you'd like to elaborate on that, please do.
I will probably say this at every clinical trials meeting because I think it's so important and such an important point that what Colin said, at any time, for any reason or no reason, you can opt out of a trial. You went through the whole screening process, you got first drug, you started drug. Tuesday, you decide, I don't want to do this. They will ask you why. You can give a reason if you like, or you can say, I just don't want to do it. And that's the end of it. It's completely up to you whether you do that. Now, we don't see a whole lot of that, but yeah, like this, there are reasons that somebody might decide, for this reason or for a whole host of other reasons why someone might decide, well, on a trial that they no longer want to participate. That is completely okay. We, as a pharmaceutical company, understand that, and we support our patients. I mean, that's part of a patient's journey. If that is part of your journey, we completely support that. So again, I'll probably say it at every meeting because I think it's such an important point, but yeah, just know that and, make sure that you understand that. And, if you no longer want to be on a trial, speak up.
Yeah. And JP, I'll just add that if you suddenly decide to drop out of a trial, I'm fairly certain that most site staff would encourage you just to stay in touch with them for at least 30 days because they want to make sure that you're not having any sort of adverse events or any side effects. And that's in the interest of your safety, right? So it's all in the interest of patient safety. So even if you suddenly drop out, they're going to encourage you, and you probably do want to be in contact for at least 30 days. And this is for patient safety purposes.
Yeah, there's usually a protocol defined time frame where they want to, whether it's 30 days, it's typically 30 days for these trials, but a protocol defined timeline, and they'll call you and how are you doing? Is everything, okay, that sort of thing. You can also opt out of that. That's up to you, but they will encourage you to do that. That's a great point.
The bigger theme here is that the trial investigators and the teams around them, in my experience, go out of the way to treat you like a dignified human being. And one of those aspects is that you're not a trapped lab rat, that you're treated like a person that has their own decision-making powers all the way through it. And they're careful that way. And one of the big issues is that you can bail out at any particular time. And that's important. I mean, if you're uncomfortable with a drug and you don't feel well, feeling that you're trapped and can't get out, not good, particularly with all the stress of cancer patients in the first place. So I think the bigger theme there is that you have the right to be treated the way you deserve to be treated. And that goes to being able to exit as well.
Well said, Jeff. Ellie had so many great points. I want to come back to one that she made. And when we went through and we look, and I haven't counted them up on Ellie's spreadsheet, but you can tell there's more than 100 trials in there. And so it's not just the community oncologist who doesn't know about trials. Even our KOLs don't know them all. They know, of course, way more than the non-academic centers who are treating all cancers. And we've had this discussion with our SAB members. And so that really means that's even more on patients and the people that care about them who are going to go on to these tools and identify things that you can bring to the oncologist and say, hey, how about this one or that one? Molecular glue degrader, what is that? Why would I think about, for instance? So I think we have our KOLs are great, but we as a patient group have a key role to play and making sure that we're keeping our oncologists up to date, because it's all, as Ellie said, it's always changing. All her not all her columns, but many of her columns are changing on a regular basis.
There was also a question from David Cohen. I wonder if this excellent spreadsheet could be used well with an AI chatbot. Patient describes situation, uploads the spreadsheet, and asks chatbot to find which trials are on the spreadsheet are the best fit.
So I can comment on this, right? Because I've tried to use AI tools and try to see like, how I can find a way to get to, let's say, a few trials that I'm looking for, and it's never been successful. I mean, maybe maybe there will be something that comes out, and in a few years we'll get to that point. But like if I am looking for a very specific criteria, AI, it's really much a manual review, and I'll tell you why. Just like Ellie said before, right? You may do a search, and then somewhere in the inclusion it says yes, all patients except ALK, right? Like that's one of the big things I find. Or if you're looking for something that specifically specifies, like I was just doing a search, and if you're looking for like a specific requirement, let's say patients must have had prior immunotherapy or something, that's very much something that AI can't do. You really have to kind of go through the inclusion exclusion, do a search, and find that specific criteria, because it varies from trial to trial. Sometimes it can be in the inclusion, sometimes it can be in the exclusion. Sometimes you search and it comes up, but then what you're looking for, it's not there. So it's a great idea, and hopefully we'll reach a point where we can get to that and it works well. But in my opinion, at this point, it really doesn't work well.
I'll try it with the spreadsheet though, just limiting the data to the spreadsheet.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, just see what happens. It's still tricky because the inclusion criteria, everyone words them differently. And so every trial has a different way of wording what they include or exclude. And so even in the spreadsheet, I usually take it from their publication in clinicaltrials.gov. So if it says, brain mets must not be growing, I'll put that in there instead of brain mets must be stable. So it's just not at all consistent. So that's the problem that we have with AI and the language that we use to describe clinical trials.
Can I quickly say that with the Stanford, the coordinator, I think they're called the clinical trial coordinator. She's awesome. She's excellent. And everybody who comes into the room, especially when I get to the cycle 6, that's when it was great to have patient advocacy in the form of documenting the side effects or whatever was going on. It was good that I documented so that we can all troubleshoot together, so that decisions were easier to make to stay in the trial or to get, to leave the trial. But I never wanted to leave the trial. I just wanted that team collaboration. And I did get that from the staff, the coordinator, everybody involved. So I think all of those elements are great. When it comes to looking for a next trial, I was just wondering, how do you even know that? I mean, you just can't just hop around and just try trial after trial after trial. I always wonder, and I'm proactive with it. I want Dr. Neal to know that website, to be able to go to and find that spreadsheet that Ellie put together. It's awesome. It's wonderful. But I always think in the back of my head, does my doctor know this?
Tyrese, you're on NBL 655 now?
Yes, I am.
And how's it working for you?
I'm stable. The chest area, the mediastinum, it's stable. All the brain tumors have been resolved. So it's been a good year now. There are absolutely no signs of metastasis in the cranial area. So
you had the question, before I participate in another trial, do I have to progress?
Right.
Yeah, there's a very important question here that I'd really like, again, let Jeff and JP and Sadia address from Diane Clement. Once again, clinical trials are not for those of us who have not progressed. Is that correct?
No.
It's not
So-
correct. It's a very important question that I really wanted addressed.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've talked about is that, clinical trials, there can be interventional trials where you actually have an active drug that you're going to receive. And then you can also have observational studies, right? So for example, a study that's basically looking at, let's say, ALK positive non-small cell lung cancer patients and, the treatments that you've been on and, just everything that we want to know about that. So that's the first thing, right? So you may not necessarily need an interventional trial, but you can certainly participate in an observational study. And then the second point about why, would you not progress? Well, I think that, so if you're progressing, right? Most trials that have enrolled patients and there is some hope or something that says, oh yes, this drug is working, I think that that's why you would want to give that a try, right? So that that, hey, there is a chance that yes, I might actually benefit from receiving this drug that is in clinical trials. And I don't know, Ken, if you want to maybe add something there, or JP.
Well, I think there's also an important point that there are interventional trials that do not require progression, and I think that really needs to be addressed. I mean, Dr. Lamb's would be one example, and
Yes.
there might be others in there as well. So
Yeah.
please address that.
The new BNT116, the BioNTech vaccine trial that just opened at MD Anderson, is also in patients that are stable. So there are two, but it's where we are funding research at several universities to try to identify what those persister cells are and how we can kill them off, because we know they're there. So and we made some really good progress in one of our projects at Ohio State that hopefully will lead to a trial to kill off drug persister cells. We're still finishing up the animal experiments. So, and just on that last point, I wanted to just say I've tried a half a dozen different AI, and in one case, I even contact the company, and nobody can get it right in my experience either. Now, maybe looking in the spreadsheet itself will be easier, but then that doesn't have everything that. So anyway, it's hopefully someday AI will be the answer, but not yet. So what I'd say about the whole, we are trying to have clinical trials for every stage of a ALK patient's journey. So in the first line, and while in MRD and at progression the first time or progression later times, and the different way the tumor evolves. So that's a key initiative in ALK Positive, is to try to develop that trials. It gives people lots of options, because Ellie gave the very beautiful story of her husband got on the right drug the first time. That doesn't happen to everybody. Sometimes it's the third drug. Sometimes it's a later one, right? And it feels kind of random. We don't really know, but that's why we want to have a lot of different opportunities so that people have options.
So Mark had a big question that I have also, and that I've heard from several people before. With the success of our current TKIs, how do you advocate with trial sponsors to include people with more than 3 to 4 lines of treatment? And I'm on line 7.
Well, I can tell you, Alice Shaw at our scientific advisory board said there should be no limit on number of prior therapies for ALK patients. So we do have very smart, knowledgeable, experienced, and advocates on our behalf, like Alice. It's very frustrating that some of them draw it so carefully, and I think that's left over from chemotherapy and IO days. I don't think it has. I think they should be right. I see odd. It's frustrating. So we're trying to open it up, but a lot of the companies they see it as, if the later you are, the more likely you've got a secondary driver, and then you may be less likely to respond to their drug. So gilteritinib is an example where going later, since that hits a lot of different targets, they're not so worried about being later. But with neladalkib, they want to get to the first line as quickly as possible. And for the the molecular glue degrader, same thing. So we'll see.
Could I ask everyone if there's something you want us to cover in future meetings, could you write it in the chat so we can get some guidance?
Hey, Jeff, is it too early to talk about the glue degraders? About what that might look like on TKS?
Ken can do it if he's wants
I
to do
didn't
that.
hear what you
He's
say,
asking, is
Mark?
it too early to talk about the molecular glue degrader?
No, it's not too early. They just treated their first patient this past week. So, but I think it's really important for people to know that that trial is just like ALCOVE 1. It's going to be opening in sets of 3 patients at a time. It's called a 3+3 trial design. You enroll 3 patients at the first dose, and then you wait and see how they do. And if they're okay, then you go up a dose and you treat 3 more. And so that's with neladalkib, there was a lot of frustration because there were long waiting lists until they got to the right dose. And they're going to have 20 sites
Ken,
open. So it's going to be
Ken, is that a certain, sorry to cut you off. Is that a certain TKI that they're looking to?
So
is that a
it's
certain
a
TKI
whole
that you have to be on?
I tell you what, Jeff, let's put that on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have the .gov site, and maybe we can get a new protocol as well.
Yeah, and we'll ask for someone to come on from the company and talk to us about the mechanism. Sadia can arrange that. They're really fantastic to work with.
And they're connecting with us and ALK Positive in Italy and just, globally. So yes, this is very exciting.
Yeah, there's a theme that we've been working on for 5-6 years that I've been doing these committees, and that's get the companies to cooperate with us, and we'll fill up their clinical trials. I mean, that's what we're doing here is essentially informing and educating, but we're also kind of recruiting for the sake of ourselves to get these drugs approved, because without clinical trials, you get nowhere. And clinical trials are notoriously unfilled, and huge money and huge projects do not go fulfilled because they can't fill the trials. So it's our job to really fill them up, and that's what we're doing. Any other questions? Before we go, any other hot questions we need to answer? I'll say thank you to Ellee for coming.
Jeff. Oh, don't forget, we have our questions for them, for the audience. What other topics would you like to see here on Clinical Trials?
That's right. I'm looking here.
So please throw that in the chat. We would love to meet your needs. So thank you for joining us. And we have an ALK talk coming up on the 29th. Jeff, do you want to tell who that is?
Yes, that's my doctor, Dr. Jonathan Reese from University of California at Davis in Sacramento. That's a mouthful. And I'm on a single patient trial for a Nuvalent drug that's actually made for ROS1, but it's also an ALK inhibitor, very much like NVL-655. And Dr. Reese was kind enough to draw up a single patient trial for me to try it at the offer of Nuvalent. And that was 90 days ago, and it's working. So, we're happy about that. And Dr. Reese will be talking at ALK Talk, and he'll talk about single patient INDs. And what's the other drug that's coming that he's going to talk about?
Ivonescimab, maybe?
Ivonescimab, right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and he's bringing somebody that you know too.
Yeah, Diana, his administrative lady. Yeah.
Or I think Johanna, actually.
Johanna, that's right.
Johanna.
That's right.
Sorry, Jeff, I'm quizzing you. And no, it's not Diana. Johanna, who he says is the brains behind the clinical trials.
She was very sharp. I mean, she's the one that did the whole job of getting the documentation ready in 6 weeks for the FDA. I mean, it was unbelievably fast from the time I first talked to Jonathan Reese to the time I had pills was 6 weeks for the whole filing. It was amazing.
Amazing.
So, yeah, that's a really good clinic. And he's a really cool guy. You guys will like him if you show up for the op talk.
And don't forget, 9 o'clock, we have a men's meeting on
You
the same
got it.
Zoom channel.
I'll
So
be there.
Thank you. This is really awesome.
You know, that would be good. Women and men, how are different genders responding to TKI? That would be cool.
That is true, right?
yeah.
Come on, somebody. All right. I love y'all. See y'all
Thank
later.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all. So
See
great to
you
see
next
Great
month.
seeing you, Ellie.
Thank you, Ellie.